Coming up on a newscast tonight. The highly anticipated Washington-Pyongyang summit is canceled. U.S. President Donald Trump pins the blame on North Korea for its change in tone and hostility, recent statements. The regime responds by expressing willingness to make adjustments to ensure the summit happens. Seoul convenes an emergency national security meeting, then emphasized the importance of the planned meeting to the two sides. North Korea releases footage of its key nuclear test site being dismantled. Many perceive this as an important step towards denuclearization. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, coming to you live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Choi. From we'll see to we're out. That's a sudden change coming from the U.S. president on the planned meeting with his North Korean counterpart. Pointing to Pyongyang's anger and hostility as the reason for the decision, Donald Trump told Kim Jong-un via a letter that is pulling the plug on the summit. Park Hee-jun starts things off with the surprise announcement.
U.S. President Donald Trump shook the world with a sudden cancellation of the highly anticipated North Korea-U.S. summit that had been set for June 12th in Singapore.
I have decided to terminate the planned summit in Singapore on June 12th. While many things can happen and a great opportunity lies ahead potentially, I believe that this is a tremendous setback for North Korea and indeed a setback for the world.
During his statement at the White House Thursday, President Trump said a bright and beautiful future can only happen when the threat of nuclear weapons is removed, and warned Pyongyang that the U.S. is more ready than it has ever been before. Adding the U.S. has support from its allies, including South Korea and Japan, President Trump urged North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to ultimately do what is right for himself and for his people. Stressing that his administration's maximum pressure and sanctions campaign will remain in the meantime, Trump nevertheless left the door open for a future meeting with Kim.
And hopefully everything's going to work out well with North Korea. And a lot of things can happen, including the fact that perhaps, and would wait, it's possible that the existing summit could take place or a summit at some later date. Nobody should be anxious. We have to get it right.
The news was announced earlier in the day in a letter to Kim Jong-un that was released by the White House. President Trump's letter pointed at the tremendous anger and open hostility displayed in North Korea's most recent statement as the reason for the cancellation. This appears to be in relation to remarks made by North Korea's Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Choi Sun-hee. She lashed out at U.S. Vice President Mike Pence for saying the North could end up like Libya if a deal is not reached. Trump concluded the letter saying the world, and North Korea in particular, had lost a great opportunity for lasting peace and prosperity. But he also put the ball back in Pyongyang's court, saying he's always open for talks should Kim Jong-un change his mind. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister released a statement on the situation just hours after Trump called off the meeting. It was unusually gentle, indicative of the regime's willingness to sit down for talks. Oh Jung-il zooms in on Pyongyang's response.
It was an unprecedentedly polished, polite, and low-key response from North Korea. Only 8 hours after the announcement from Washington, North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Kim Kye-gwan released a statement upon authorization urging the U.S. to give more thought to canceling the June 12th summit. North Korea said it wants to give the U.S. more time and opportunity. It highlighted it's willing to sit down face-to-face with Washington at any time and in any format to work through their issues. Pyongyang defended what President Trump called tremendous anger and open hostility, saying it was, quote, just a reaction to Washington's pressure over unilateral denuclearization. The regime went on to stress that the current situation, which shows a very deep rift between the two sides, rather means the summit talks are urgently needed. North Korea did express regret over Trump's decision, but at the same time said that the regime has been highly anticipating the summit as well as the so-called Trump model. Saying that Pyongyang appreciates Trump for making a decision that no other American president has, the statement added Kim Jong-un has been pouring his efforts into summit preparations.
The fact that this statement was written upon authorization means it's a message from Kim Jong-un. And notice how the statement mentioned the Trump model. I believe this means that the North could be a bit flexible in its denuclearization talks with Washington.
Then why is North Korea so willing or desperate to restore the summit talks, even willing to drop its pre-summit power struggle with the U.S.? According to some experts, the motive lies in the recent policy shift to economic development.
The ultimate damage goes to Kim Jong-un because North Korea would face even greater economic sanctions and military pressure. So Kim Jong-un can't leave the game. Canceling the summit talks would cause fundamental problems to Kim's new policy goal of economic development.
The regime is planning large-scale celebrations on September 9th for the 70th anniversary of the regime's establishment. For the North Korean regime that needs to show its people some tangible accomplishments, the Pyongyang-Washington summit could be an opportunity too big to miss. 오정희, Arirang News.
The nation's top office says the White House informed the South Korean embassy in Washington just as they released Trump's summit cancellation letter to the North. And according to our Won Jung-hwan, the Liberal leader and his team appear determined to do all they can to make the maiden meeting happen.
Baffled and very regretful were the immediate words from South Korean President Moon Jae-in in response to U.S. President Donald Trump's abrupt cancellation of the planned meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Singapore that had been set for June 12. South Korea's presidential Blue House said Friday afternoon that the South Korean embassy in Washington had received notice from the White House as the White House released Mr. Trump's summit cancellation letter to North Korea on Thursday. That, based on Seoul's top office explanation, took a little while. In a statement released following an hour-long emergency meeting of its National Security Council at midnight, the South Korean president urged both North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump to resolve the issue through direct dialogue. He said the sensitivity and difficulty of such diplomatic issues call for direct and more close dialogue by the leaders. The current way of communication just will not work. That position was reiterated in a meeting of the National Security Council Standing Committee later in the afternoon.
The NSC members confirmed the need for direct communication between the leaders of North Korea and the US and agreed to continue to pursue all necessary efforts.
President Moon's top security officials also agreed that it's important to continue making efforts to improve inter-Korean relations based on April 27th's Panmunjom Declaration, and that such efforts will in the end help better North Korea-U.S. ties and create another momentum for a complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. So for now, it looks like South Korean President Moon and his team hasn't given up on the last strand of hope for June 12th in Singapore, and will hustle to try and bring Kim and Trump together again. Because he still needs Pyongyang and Washington to get along for his own agenda, for lasting peace to succeed on the Korean peninsula. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
And now let's delve deeper into the rapid developments related to the summit between the North and the United States. To help us do that, we have Dr. Se-ryun, Professor of Law at Kyung-hee University, with us in the studio. Again, thank you for being here with us.
My pleasure.
Now, Professor, fire and aim seems to be the commonly seen action taken by President Donald Trump, the larger-than-life leader of the United States. Common sense dictates that these actions may be worthy of criticism, but Trump is anything but a conventional politician. We all know that by now. Initially, the world was shocked, but perhaps it seems like he is getting the desired effect with his actions.
Well, desired effect is debatable. I think that both Kim Jong-un and President Trump has vacillated between the shock and awe campaign, fire and fury, to charm offensive, and also profuse praise for each other. I think it's part of their tactics in negotiation. So depending on which point you focus on, it might be on the good side or bad side. I think the more important thing is that in a larger picture, everybody wants the deal. But in this case, because there are genuine content-based question marks in terms of what kind of denuclearization we're talking about and what kind of economic packages we end up with, resulting in some sort of peace regime in Korean Peninsula. So I think the attention to detail is very important, but at this point what we have seen mostly was jockeying for position or trying to kind of impress each other in terms of, threats. So I think it has to change in terms of dynamics to get to the desired result.
Right, it seems like a lot of battling for position, like boxing out for a rebound or poking each other to make sure they get a response, any response to make sure that, are you listening, are you still there? That seems to be the communication that's going on between the United States and North Korea at this point. Of course,
Right.
Every time they do that, they throw the world into a disarray, fearing the worst possible outcome, because they both have a tendency to talk about the possible option of military actions. Now, moving on, North Korea, of course, appears to play the similar game. They change their tone over and over again, and with Washington turning its back on them, they seem to suddenly take on a different characteristic. But we've seen North Korea blow hot and cold before, and mixed signals being sent out time and time again. What can we make of the latest persona that North Korea is taking on after Washington's very stern measure?
I think that they're relenting a little bit at this point for now, but I think it's in the context of what kind of positions they're trying to have. I think that a lot of people think, and I join with them, that in some ways North Korea has dropped the ball, maybe miscalculating the eagerness of Donald Trump to get the deal done. So that's why I think they're taken aback by this announcement of cancellation. But if you look at it from a negotiation point of view, one of the most important weapons for any negotiator is an ability or a believable communication to the other side that we can walk away anytime, and this is not as important as what you think it is. And that Donald Trump, with that letter, has demonstrated that. So in that sense, it's part of his demonstration, his negotiation tactic, which is well scripted even in his book. So looking back, I think a lot of people will say, wow, that makes sense. That's his modus operandi in his deal days in New York. But whether it works or not, probably both has found a perfect match for each other. Both are good at the brinkmanship, bluffing in many ways. So I go back to the theme that that may be important in some stages, but when they get down to the negotiation, really they have to attend to the attention to the details, and somebody has to put in serious work to build a trust and get the communication going. Now, I think in that sense, the President Moon might be the really important person to get that thing going.
Right, it's a very important and difficult role playing the mediator. In any situation, the messenger is always at a very dangerous position of taking the blame. We are, of course, somewhat concerned, but at the same time very proud of what President Moon Jae-in has been doing to maintain this intricate balance, a high wire act, if you might add, between the two very unpredictable leaders. Going back to his latest showing in the United States, meeting with President Donald Trump. Usually these two seem to get along great. President Donald Trump is not one to put on I suppose, a different type of social, attractive, different mannerism just to pretend to be friends with someone. He clearly lets you know if he's not happy or if he does not feel comfortable interacting with certain world leaders. We've seen that in the past. President Moon Jae-in certainly is not one of them. They seem to have great chemistry, and it's always a laid-back atmosphere when they hold press conferences after their meeting. But what happened after that was President Moon seemed a little baffled about the outcome, the sudden change of heart from Donald Trump to cancel the talks.
Right.
So does this reflect badly on his ability to be the mediator, to be possibly have been kept out of the loop for a while as this big news broke?
Well, it's a little bit puzzling, the fact that Donald Trump pulled out or canceled the thing was predicted by actually many people. But the fact that it was not communicated to South Korea, which we assume that have been coordinating pretty closely. That's the very surprising part. But I think that Donald Trump has been hampered by the domestic woes and a lot of criticism about the position that he is in vis-a-vis North Korea. So I don't think it's surprising that he made the decision at the last minute to pull out, to look at the total situation. I think that, ironically, this puts President Moon Jae-in's position more important than ever. I think there was a worry or a concern that after the venue and the time was set for the now canceled summit meetings between North Korea and Donald Trump, South Korean president's role has been diminished so far back that it was non-visible. But at this point, to resuscitate that meeting or get anything going, probably the most important person could be, other than those two, President Moon, to play the go-between role in an earnest sense.
Right, so he's coming off the bench to play a bigger role now, whether he likes it or not. Right. From here on. Well, moving on to China, of course, the traditional ally that we cannot speak about North Korea without. We've seen Kim Jong-un turn to the Chinese leadership to perhaps let them know of their intentions or movements from here on or here forth. How big is China's influence so far, and what kind of role will they play in terms of changing North Korea's stance or positions related to the summits with the United States?
I remember that China has come onto the scene pretty late in the game, and actually there was a concern that there was a so-called China passing phenomenon going on. So I don't think China has played a very big role in this because for the North Korean side as well, they have a genuine incentive to keep a little bit of distance between the China and North Korea, as well as China with the United States. So at this point, China's role probably might not have been too big. But China is very important once some kind of peace regime is established in the Korean Peninsula to keep the regime going, and also any kind of sanctions, any kind of benefits flowing out of that deal can be sustained. Now we have seen the United States pulling out of Iran deal, and actually Donald Trump has pulled out of a lot of things. So as an insurance and as somebody who would be a part of the guard to keep that regime going, I think that China's role will be very important going forward.
Right. Eventually, it's inevitable that China will play a significant role in terms of moving forward with North Korea's progression towards becoming a greater member of the society, as in the international community. Professor, unfortunately, we have run out of time. Professor Se-ryun, thank you so much again for coming in to help us dissect things into digestible bites. We appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure.
The sudden cancellation of that historic event comes as a shock to many, as it was looked to help play a crucial role in establishing world peace. Inside the United States, politicians are split on where they stand regarding that sudden decision. Elsewhere around the world, numerous leaders expressed regret over the development. Cha Sang-mi shares with us their remarks.
The international community was rocked by the cancellation of what would have been a historic summit. Within the United States, there were mixed responses within Congress. Most Republican lawmakers approved of President Trump's decision, with some saying the meeting would have been treacherous if it had gone ahead. House Speaker Paul Ryan said shortly after the announcement that North Korea must show more commitment to a peaceful resolution, and the maximum pressure campaign must continue. Democrats criticized President Trump for making a, quote, amateur decision that shows his lack of preparedness for the meeting. The Pentagon said it's fully prepared to respond to any provocative actions from the North. The director of the U.S. Joint Staff, Lieutenant General Kenneth McKenzie, said that if any provocations came from Pyongyang, the U.S. would work with its allies to confront them. Meanwhile, world leaders are voicing their disappointment. Singapore, which would have hosted the Kim-Trump talks, said it regrets the U.S. decision. The country's foreign ministry hoped for continued efforts to find lasting peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. Russian President Vladimir Putin said he regretted Trump's decision and claimed North Korea had been keeping its promises. In speaking at a joint press conference with Putin in St. Petersburg, French President Emmanuel Macron said he hoped the announcement would just be a small event in the bigger long-term picture. The British government said it was disappointed the summit would no longer go ahead. A spokesperson for Prime Minister Theresa May also called for the complete denuclearization on the Korean peninsula, and the UK will continue to work with its international partners until it's achieved. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres also expressed deep disappointment and urged all parties to continue dialogue for the peace and denuclearization on the Korean peninsula. The Japanese government had a somewhat different stance. Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga at a press conference showed understanding of the cancellation as he pledged to continue to put pressure on Pyongyang until it gives up its nuclear weapons. North Korea's closest neighbor, China, called on Washington and Pyongyang to continue to push for denuclearization on the Korean peninsula. Beijing's foreign ministry spokesperson Lu Kang also praised Pyongyang's dismantlement of its nuclear test site. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
Some perceive Trump's shocking decision as an impulsive one, but there are those who believe it is a calculated move, perhaps even a negotiation strategy. Oh Se-ryun help us find out if there's a method to his madness.
The cancellation of the North Korea-U.S. summit may have been a sudden decision, but it wasn't entirely a surprise. Experts on North Korea told Arirang News Friday it was clear both sides had lacked working-level preparations for a meeting to be held on June 12th.
I think the American side particularly wasn't really ready. Donald Trump wasn't really focusing on this very much. He was sort of interested in the drama of it and the theater of it, but it's not really clear that the president was actually doing the research and the time and the study necessary to actually debate these complex issues with the North. North Korea's behavior in the last week didn't help. They stood up American negotiators who went to Singapore. They just let them standing there for 3 days in a row. I think the whole thing was just going too fast.
Without sufficient back-channel talks, major sticking points remain unresolved. According to some experts, that is why both Washington and Pyongyang over the past week indicated they may call the summit off.
There's a little gamesmanship going on here. In Trump's case, a lot of the critics were saying he seems too eager for the summit, so he's playing hard to get. And the North Koreans have a history of also playing hard to get. After all, the North Koreans said they'd walk away from the table if the U.S. was trying to force them to denuclearize.
Pyongyang has called for a gradual process of scrapping its nukes, an approach Washington has resisted, given the North's track record of breaking promises and backing out of verifying its nuclear dismantlement.
My strong hunch is, if serious people are working on the U.S. side, we will want to have the North stop producing plutonium and highly enriched uranium. That's the first order of business. We probably want to have the second enrichment site, the location of the second enrichment site, also told to us at some point early on, some declaration of how much plutonium and highly enriched uranium the North has produced and how many weapons they've had. They don't all have to be done at the summit, but those are key, critical, early steps.
North Korea, on its part, is also likely to demand concrete steps from the US. First and foremost, a security guarantee for its ruling regime.
They want to make sure that if they do give up some of their nuclear weapons program, that the United States won't attack them. I think the United States is going to have trouble credibly committing to North Korean security, which is why the North Koreans will never go to zero. The Libyan model didn't work out very well for the Libyans, right? I mean, Muammar Gaddafi ended up meeting a pretty grisly end. So the Americans need to make a set of reasonable offers the North Koreans might buy, and then the North Koreans come back with something that we want, right? Besides security guarantees, if I were the North Koreans, I would imagine they're going to ask for sanctions relief, economic assistance, diplomatic normalization.
Before a new date and venue is set, experts say working-level efforts are needed from both sides, involving diplomats and nuclear weapons experts. They need to devise a framework that President Trump and Kim Jong-un can work with to reach a denuclearization agreement. Oh Se-ryun, Arirang News.
The journalists from various countries invited to witness the destruction of North Korea's key nuclear test site returned to the press center in Wonsan, meaning access to internet again. And the video footage of the process is revealed to the world. Lee Ji-won has the highlights of the event designed to display the regime's willingness to denuclearize.
North Korea's Punggye-ri nuclear test site in the country's northeastern Hamgyeongbuk-do province became a thing of the past on Thursday. After a long, arduous journey, the reporters were taken close to the North Portal, also known as Tunnel Number 2, the place where the regime has conducted most of its nuclear tests, from the second one to the sixth. There, they were briefed by the deputy chair of the North's Nuclear Weapons Institute, Kang Kyung-ho. Kang said preparations to shut the site had been made after plans for its closure were announced 2 weeks ago. The regime, he said, had halted building work and removed cables, test equipment, and pipes. The only stage left was for the reporters to witness the demolition of the tunnels and remaining facilities. And at 11 a.m., the north portal was blown up. The first blast destroyed the entrance to it, sending rocks and soil flying. Then inside the tunnel, there were more explosions, as if to assure the reporters that everything inside the portal had been destroyed. Soon, another blast destroyed an observation building near the entrance. A second round of explosions took place at 2:17 p.m., starting at the west portal, known as Tunnel Number 4, and then at nearby living quarters 30 minutes later. A thundering explosion, and all that was left of the building was rubble and dust. The third round of explosions took place slightly past 4 in the afternoon, destroying the last remaining tunnel, number 3, also known as the South Portal. 15 minutes later, a military barracks was also blown up. Once the explosions were over, Deputy Chair Kang officially declared the test site closed.
The Democratic People's Republic of Korea's Nuclear Weapons Institute held a ceremony that completely demolished the northern nuclear test site on May 24, 2018, to transparently show our willingness to cease nuclear testing. By blowing up the tunnels, we completely blocked the entrances to them, as well as a number of security facilities and observation buildings. There were no radiation leaks, nor was there any fundamental impact on the surrounding environment.
He added that the cessation of nuclear tests is an important step in the world's nuclear disarmament, and that the North will continue working together with people of peace to build a nuclear-free, peaceful world. The ceremony wrapped up at around 5 p.m. Thursday evening, and at 7 p.m. the international reporters started on the long trip back to their hotel in Wonsan, where they are now. They fly back to Beijing on Saturday. South Korea's foreign ministry on Thursday welcomed North Korea's move and said that it sees the site's demolition as the North's first step in fulfilling its pledge to denuclearize. 이지원, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach for the updates you'll need. Michelle, I heard it's going to get even hotter tomorrow.
That's right, Daniel. Under strong sunlight, our nation's daytime highs will reach up to what we would normally see in July. And the bad fine dust levels that we've had for a couple of days, which are still bad, are expected to clear up starting tonight. And we should expect it to normalize completely before noon tomorrow. Going over to our readings for tomorrow, Seoul will begin at 16 degrees Celsius, Daegu at 15, Gyeongju begins at 10 degrees. Into the afternoon, Seoul will peak up to 29 degrees. Gwangju also hits hot at 29, while Busan is lower at 24 degrees. Rain is expected over on Jeju Island tonight until the early morning tomorrow. Other than that, you can expect ongoing hot and sunny days. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have in store for you on tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Thank you for watching. Here's wishing you an incredible weekend.